I have an article here that I was just looking at, and this is on our Virome. If you think you don't have any viruses, think again. It may be hard to fathom, but the human body is occupied by a large collection of microorganisms, commonly referred to as the microbiome, that have evolved with us since the early days of man. Scientists have only recently begun to quantify this microbiome and discovered that it is inhabited by at least 38 trillion bacteria. More intriguing, perhaps, is that the bacteria are not the most abundant microbes that live in our body. That award goes to viruses. It has been estimated there are over 380 trillion viruses inhabiting us, a community collectively known as human virome. But these viruses are not dangerous ones that you commonly hear about, like those that cause the flu or common cold or more sinister infections like Ebola or dengue fever. Many of these viruses infect the bacteria that live inside of us, are also known as bacteriophages or phages for short. The human body is a breeding ground for these phages, and despite their abundance, we have very little insight into all they are or any of the other viruses in the body and what they are doing. This guy says, I'm a physician scientist studying the human microbiome and focusing on viruses because I believe that harnessing the power of bacteria's ultimate natural predators will teach us how to prevent and combat bacterial infections. Okay, so what is the point of this? They're actually saying that these viruses are these deadly things that are running around out here. They will use the words invade. Well, how does something dead and dormant, non-functioning invade? And now we got disputes going on between the World Health Organization and the CDC because the CDC came out and said, you cannot contract this in the air. It's not out there floating around. They keep talking about the droplets, but those droplets have to hit something. And unless you're actually directly like cough in someone's face. And according to the very first videos I watched on this, when they had the Spanish flu years ago, way back in 1918, they literally were taking people's human mucus out of their nose and injecting it into somebody's arm and still couldn't inject the virus into them. So the question is, do they actually know what causes these infections? And so I want to go back to the article real quick, and I'm not going to go real deep into this. This is the actual article on the government's website, How Infections Work. Now, there is a separate article, What You Need to Know About Infectious Disease. But infections are not disease. You get a cut on your leg and it gets infected, it's an infection. You get poison, like snake bite, that gets into your blood or into your water. We're 70% water. So that is poisonous because the cells are going, get that out of here. It's not absorbing it into the cell, although snake venom can be very deadly because it's actually active. It's not dead like a virus is. It actually has proteins and enzymes that go to work, either causing your blood to clot or causing you to bleed out or whatever. They can be extremely deadly. I mean, not all of them, but there are, obviously we know that there are snake venom and even spider venom that will do people in quickly. But it's completely different when you're talking about even bacteria. You eat bad food, it's got some kind of bad bacteria in it, and your body's going to get it out of here. Your cells don't want it. That's the immediate response. And so if our cells are working together with these beneficial bacteria and these beneficial viruses, then how is it that these dead, dormant things are getting into the cell to invade the cell and imprint themselves on perfectly good DNA? This has been my question from day one on this. And I have a sister who was in virology for 30 years. She worked at Rollins Lab in Raleigh, North Carolina, retired from the lab. And one of the questions I asked her was, I said, well, actually, how do these things actually work? And she said, well, I've tested dozens of coronaviruses. They're all extremely weak. They're nothing but a common cold. She said they only hurt people if they're actually sitting on their deathbed and they already got all kinds of comorbidities, and it just puts an extra strain on the body that the body can't handle. Basically, for all intents and purposes, saying they were already on their way out the door anyway. And maybe they could have recovered, maybe not. We worry about when people go to the hospital getting pneumonia, things like that, right? It's always been a problem. So this is nothing new. But I asked her, I said, how do they actually work? And she said, well, the truth is, we don't really know, actually. There's no settled science on how viruses actually work. That's the reason I wanted to put out this bit of information today, because even in their literature, when you go in here and read it, okay, I typed in how does a virus work, and it sent me to the government's website. It says how infection works. It didn't say virus. And this is where I got the connection between the microbiome and viruses in the virome, which I was reading from. Okay? And so I can't prove it, but my conclusion so far about viruses is that when they did the Spanish flu, if you go back and look at the Spanish flu way back when, this was the first introduction of radio waves. And these are the things that people have talked about ever since this shutdown, lockdown started in March, and all this has been going on. They've been talking about our cell phones and the fact that these things are sending and receiving microwave radiation. Well, radiation, we already know, affects our body in all kinds of dramatic ways, just UV radiation alone. And I know this because I'm being in the Navy's nuclear power program. I know exactly how that stuff works. Because you have alpha decay, beta and plus and beta minus decay, and then you have gamma radiation. Alpha particles aren't really that harmful unless you breathe them in because they're big, they can't get through the skin. The beta particles are a little bit different. And then gamma rays work completely different than the other two because the gamma radiation is like cosmic rays and all the solar winds and things that we get on a daily basis. And we're being cooked by this. If you're in your house right now, you got windows, unless you're under a concrete roof on your house, you're getting X-rayed right now. So these things impinge onto the DNA and they will literally break things apart. The reason it does is because of hydrogen molecules. Because radiation affects the hydrogen molecule because when it comes to EM radiation, there's always been this debate, is it a particle or a wave? And the answer has always been, it acts like both. So the EM radiation itself is small enough and the hydrogen molecule is small enough that all you have to do is lock one electron out of it and you've changed and altered that entire thing. If you do that with a DNA, a strand of DNA, then you have just destroyed the DNA. So when you go back and look at what they said.
If you're enjoying the content on this channel, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that bell icon so that you don't miss any future updates. We live in a world now where propaganda and censorship are the rule of the day. YouTube presentations, Facebook presentations, or any other presentation will not have completed information. If you'd like to see a complete interview, plus more content like this, then please subscribe to my Patreon, David Williams Unleashed, and then check out our membership site, Get Out of the System, because you can't get out of this system until you get the system out of you. Thanks for watching.